The story you are about to read begins not with a declaration of war, but with a whisper, not with an invasion, but with a theft. It is a tale that will journey from the cold, silent halls of alien logic to the warm, furious heart of what it means to be human. It explores a universal truth that the galaxy forgot. While you can negotiate with a soldier, bargain with a politician, or reason with a philosopher, there is no force in creation more utterly focused, more ingeniously destructive, or more relentlessly final than a parent who has had their child taken. Forget what you think you know about humanity's place in the stars. This is not their story of conquest. This is the galaxy's story of awakening to a terrifying and beautiful reality. When you steal from humanity, you do not steal resources or territory. You steal the very echo of their future, and they will move heaven and earth and every star in between to get it back. The question is not if they will come. The question is what will be left when they are done. The command center of the Galactic Consensus Defense Fleet was a monument to serene order. Holographic star maps glowed with soft light, and data streams flowed in silent, efficient rivers. General Vraxis, a being of slender build with chitinous plates of deep cobalt and eyes that held the calm of centuries, studied the latest intelligence reports. Humanity's latest deep space colony vessel, the Odyssey's Dawn, had suffered a catastrophic drive failure in a remote, unmapped sector. A tragedy, but a contained one. Search and rescue was deemed logistically unfeasible by consensus protocols. The system was a graveyard. His second-in-command, Subcommander Klar of Insectoid Zith, approached, her mandibles clicking with a subtle anxiety the general had learned to recognize. General, a report from the Science Directorate. Section Chief Zyler has returned from a survey mission in the Tychoni sector. He requests an immediate debrief. He claims a breakthrough in psychic energy harvesting. Vraxis felt a ripple of unease. Zyler, a tall, willowy the lean whose species prize cold intellect above all, was ambitious and often operated at the blurred edge of ethical protocols. The Tychoni sector? That borders the human vessel's last known coordinates. His mission had no clearance for that region. His authorization was granted by the Subcommittee for Resource Acquisition. Klar responded, her tone neutral. He is en route. Zyler entered not with triumph, but with a chilling serenity. He presented his data. The energy readings were staggering. We have discovered a potent, renewable source of psionic resonance, Zyler explained, his voice a soft hum. Unfiltered by adult cognitive barriers. It is pure, potent, and can be ethically harvested to power our quantum shield networks for a millennium. The source is biological. The holographic display shifted. It showed not schematics, but life sign scans. Dozens of them. Small, warm, vibrant biosigns clustered in a sterile, facility-like environment. The genetic markers flashed beside them, a sequence Vraxis had seen in briefings. Homo sapiens sapiens. Juvenile. The serene order of the command center shattered in Vraxis's mind. The cold logic of the reports, the catastrophic failure, Zyler's proximity, the biological source. It all coalesced into a horror so profound his chitinous plates actually rattled. He stood, his chair flying back with a crash that echoed in the suddenly silent room. You surveyed the Odyssey's dawn, Vraxis stated, his voice dangerously low. It was a derelict. A resource, Zyler corrected, unblinking. Those life signs, those are human children. The adult specimens were incompatible with the harvesting process. They exhibited excessive synaptic resistance. Their loss was regrettable, but necessary for the extraction of the juveniles. The young, however, in their state of developmental plasticity and emotional vulnerability, generate a phenomenal psychic output. Fear, longing, hope, dreams. We have termed it soulite. It is the greatest energy discovery since fusion. Vraxis stared at the small, blinking lights on the screen, each representing a stolen child, alone and terrified, being used as a living battery. The galaxy's polite fiction about humanity's manageable nature evaporated. He saw not a mid-tier species, but a predator sleeping in the dark. And Xyler had just kicked its young. His voice, when it came, was not a shout. It was a strained, hollow thing that carried the weight of impending doom. You stole. Human. Children. Xyler finally showed a flicker of something. Not remorse, but intellectual irritation. Salvaged. For the greater good of the consensus. Their civilization is fragmented. They lack a unified government. They will not even know where to look. The statistical probability of a coordinated, effective response is 0.00. You fool. Vraxis roared, the sound shocking every being in the room. You think in statistics and probabilities. You have not studied them. You have read reports, but you have not watched them. Do you know what they call a young human that is threatened? Do you know what happens when you take one? Before Xyler could offer another logical rebuttal, the tactical console erupted in a blare of crimson alarms. Clara's voice was tight. General, unidentified quantum wake signatures. Dozens of them, materializing just outside the system's defensive perimeter. The signatures, they're not matching any known consensus or hostile Empire drive technology. On the main viewer, the starfield rippled. Ships tore into reality. They were not sleek consensus vessels. They were brutal, angular, and armored. They looked less like starships and more like flying fortresses scarred and pitted. Their weapons were not gracefully integrated. They were blatant, protruding promises of violence. And they were forming up not in a diplomatic array, but in a blunt, offensive spearhead. One ship, larger and more scarred than the others, hung at the tip like a cleaver. A communication request flashed, a raw, audiovisual feed on a primitive frequency, bypassing all diplomatic protocols. Vraxis, heart sinking, nodded. The screen resolved to a human face. It was a woman, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes the color of weathered steel. She wore a simple, worn flight suit. There were no titles, no insignia of a recognized human government. Behind her, the bridge was a cacophony of shouted orders and clanging metal, a stark contrast to the consensus's silence. She spoke, her voice rough, devoid of diplomatic pleasantry, vibrating with a fury so deep it was almost calm. General Vraxis of the Galactic Consensus Defense Fleet. I am Captain Elena Vance of the Earth-reclaimed vessel Retribution. You have something that belongs to us. You have 63 of our children. You will provide their exact coordinates immediately. You will stand down all defensive systems in Sector Tychonis. You have 1 hour. Xyler scoffed audibly. A single rogue vessel from a fractured polity. They are bluffing. Their weaponry is inferior. We should respond with a warning shot across her bow. Demonstrate consensus superiority. Captain Vance's eyes flickered, as if she had heard him. Her gaze locked onto the screen, past Vraxis, seeming to bore directly into Xyler. I hear a bug buzzing, General. Let me be perfectly clear for the buzzing bug, and for you. This is not a negotiation. This is not a diplomatic incident. This is a recovery. That facility, and every being within 1,000,000 kilometers of it who stands in our way, is forfeit. The clock starts now. The transmission cut. The tactical display showed the human ships, a motley collection of military remnants, retrofitted colony ships, and privateer vessels, holding formation with terrifying discipline. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and deep in hostile space. And they had not come to talk. Vraxis turned from the screen to Xyler, who was still smiling with smug logic. The general felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. They were not facing a government. They were facing a storm. And Xyler, in his infinite, foolish wisdom, had just told them where their stolen young were. The Retribution and its ragged armada were not pointed at the fleet. Their entire formation was oriented toward the secret research facility in Tychonis. 1 hour, Vraxis whispered. Then, to Clar, he gave the order that felt like signing his own career's death warrant, but perhaps saving billions of lives. Recall all patrols from Tychonis. Place the 5th Defense Fleet on standby, but do not engage. And give me a direct, secure line to the human captain. Now, the bridge of the Retribution was a symphony of controlled chaos, a stark contrast to the silent dread now permeating the consensus command center. Elena Vance stood at the center of it, a fixed point in the storm. The faces of her crew, a mix of former Earth Navy, Martian Freehold volunteers, and outright scavengers united by a single, furious purpose, were grimly focused. The image of the small, blinking life signs from Xyler's stolen data, which a consensus defector had risked everything to leak months ago, was burned onto every screen in their minds. Status of the Armada? Elena's voice cut through the noise. Her tactical officer, a hulking man named Erickson with a burn scar across his jaw, responded without looking up. 47 vessels holding formation. The Mjolnir reports their jury-rigged plasma lances are hot. The Kintsugi says their shields are at 90%, but they're holding on with prayer and spit. They're all ready, Captain. They're all angry. Good. Elena's eyes were fixed on the tactical overlay. The consensus Fifth Fleet was a gleaming wall of light between them and Tychones. Vraxis had pulled back the immediate patrols, a surprising move, but the main fleet was still a formidable barrier. Her science officer, a young woman named Lee who had lost a brother on the Odyssey's dawn, looked up, her face pale. Captain, I'm picking up anomalous energy readings from the target coordinates. It matches the Soul Light signature from the leaked files. It's spiking. They're actively draining them. A cold fury, colder than the void outside, settled in Elena's gut. She had seen the files. She knew what harvesting meant. Every sob, every nightmare, every moment of fear those children felt was being turned into power for their captors. The clock in her mind, already ticking down, now screamed. A private channel alert chimed. It was the secure line from General Vraxis. She accepted, her face appearing stern and isolated on a side screen. Captain Vance. Vraxis's image appeared, his calm demeanor now strained. You must understand the situation. Sub-Chief Xyler acted without full council authorization. His facility is a science directorate asset. I cannot simply order it to stand down. I am negotiating from within. Your negotiations are irrelevant, General, Elena said, her voice flat. You have 57 minutes. My only interest in you is whether that fleet of yours is going to be a speed bump or a crater. You are outmatched. Even if you broke through, which you will not, the repercussions for your species, Vraxis pleaded, his logical world crumbling. Elena leaned forward. Let me explain something your Xyler will never understand. You see a warship. You see guns and shields and a threat to be quantified. You are wrong. I'm not a soldier right now, General. I'm a mother. Erickson, there's a father. Lee is a sister. On every ship behind me, there are parents, siblings, aunts, uncles. You're not facing a military. You're facing a family. And you tortured our kids. She cut the channel. Erickson. The Canterbury and the Proud Mary are to jump on my mark. Coordinates, these blind spots in their sensor net, here and here. She pointed at the hologram, not at the fleet, but at the logistical and supply lines behind it. They're civilian freight haulers, Captain. They have pop guns, Erickson said, confused. They're not targeting warships. They're targeting the Fifth Fleet's catering barges, their water recyclers, and their long-range communications relay. A slow, grim smile spread across Erickson's scarred face. Aim for the stomach and the tongue. Understood. Back in the consensus command, Vraxis was frantically arguing with the council when the reports came in. Two small, seemingly harmless human vessels had appeared deep inside their secure rear zone. They had not fired a single shot at the warships. Instead, with absurdly precise accuracy, they had vaporized the fleet's central food synthesis hub, crippled the primary water reclamation array, and turned the main FTL comms array into a cloud of glittering debris. Chaos erupted. A fleet could fight for days, but without fresh water and food, morale would collapse in hours. Without communications, they were isolated. It was not a military tactic. It was a brutal, pragmatic act of sabotage that no consensus admiral would ever have conceived. It was unclean, dishonorable. Xyler watched, his smugness fading into confusion. This is insanity. They attack our kitchens. Vraxis whirled on him, his fear turning to rage. No, you fool. They're showing us they are not fighting a war. They're solving a problem. The problem is us being in their way. He opened the channel to Elena again, desperation clear. Captain Vance, a ceasefire. I will grant you safe passage to the edge of the Tyconis sector. You must stand down this grotesque sabotage. Elena's face rapid. 30 minutes, General. And your offer is insufficient. I don't want passage to the edge. I want the coordinates of every child, the schematics of the facility, and your personal guarantee of non-interference. Or my freighters, which your scanners doubtless now classify as low threat, will begin targeting the environmental control systems on your flagship. I wonder how long your crew can breathe vacuum. It was a level of ruthlessness that bypassed strategy and spoke directly to primal survival. Vraxis, defeated and horrified, began transmitting the data. As he did, a new alarm sounded on the Retribution. Captain, massive quantum wake, bigger than anything on record, emerging directly between us and the Fifth Fleet. Space itself seemed to tear. A vessel emerged that dwarfed even the largest consensus dreadnought. It was smooth, ancient, and bore the sigil of the Galactic Consensus High Council. The Arbiter. The Council's personal envoy had arrived. A broadcast washed over all channels, authoritative and serene. This is emissary tale of the High Council. All aggressive actions will cease immediately. The human vessels will power down weapons and submit to boarding for inspection. The matter of the Tyconis facility is an internal consensus affair. Any further breach of galactic peace will be met with overwhelming force. Silence fell on the Retribution Bridge. The colossal ship before them represented an enemy they could not possibly fight. The hope that had flared with Vraxis's submission died. Elena Vance looked at the gargantuan vessel, then at the faces of her crew, seeing the despair creep in. She looked at the still blinking icons of their children, so close yet now impossibly far. She keyed a ship-wide comm, her voice calm, clear, and resonant with a truth that no alien logic could ever counter. Crew of the Retribution, captains of the Armada, they have brought a bigger gun. That was always a possibility. But this was never about who has the bigger gun. This is about who is right. They have our children. So listen to me. We do not power down. We do not submit. Erickson, bring us to battle stations. Lee, route all non-essential power to forward shields and engines. To all ships, formation Delta. We are going through. She turned back to the screen, opening a channel on all frequencies, her image broadcast to the Arbiter, to Vraxis, to Xyler's facility, to the universe. Emissary Tale. This is Captain Elena Vance of Earth. You speak of galactic peace. There is no peace while our children are in chains. You have your orders. I have my duty. See you in hell. She cut the channel. All ships. Maximum burn. Target. The Arbiter's main sensor array. Then, straight for the facility. No matter what. The ragged human armada, a speck against the colossal Arbiter, lit their engines as one and charged directly at the heart of galactic authority. The void between the human armada and the monolithic Arbiter was not empty. It was a chasm charged with disbelief. On the bridge of the consensus flagship, Emissary Tale, a being of refined silicate beauty and millennia-old authority, watched the tactical display with something akin to aesthetic disappointment. The humans were not just disobeying. They were performing a form of collective suicide. Their course was a direct, futile line toward his vessel's impregnable shields. Activate forward barrier. Minimal power. Prepare tractor beams for the lead vessel. Tail instructed, his voice like grinding crystals. Subdue them. We will make an example. But the Council desires to study their irrational tenacity. On the Retribution, alarms blared as the Arbiter's energy field flared to life, a wall of shimmering gold light spanning thousands of kilometers. It was a technology meant to deflect planet-killer asteroids. Elena's order seemed insane. Erickson now, she said, her voice devoid of anything but certainty. The human armada did not fire a single weapon. Instead, at the last possible second, it fractured. The 47 ships broke into a seemingly chaotic, swirling pattern, like a shoal of fish evading a predator. But it was not chaos. It was a maneuver drilled in secret on dead rocks, and, in the dark spaces between stars, a dance of desperation called the swarm. Small, agile frigates like the Kintsugi shot ahead, not toward the shield, but along its periphery, spraying clouds of magnetized chaff and old-fashioned radar-reflective foil. The Arbiter's targeting systems, designed for large, predictable warships, momentarily hiccuped, painting 100 false ghosts on its screens. In that moment of confusion, the heavier human vessels, the Mjolnir, the Proud Mary, even the battered colony ship Canterbury, unleashed their entire arsenals, not on the Arbiter's hull, but on a single, specific point in space just ahead of the Golden Barrier, a drifting, derelict consensus communication satellite they had tagged on the way in. The concentrated fire, plasma, kinetics, even makeshift ballistic missiles, vaporized the satellite, creating an instantaneous, superheated cloud of metallic plasma and debris. The cloud, propelled by the blasts, washed over the section of the Arbiter's shield. Tail watched, puzzled, as his shield integrity fluctuated by a meaningless 0.2%. What are they attempting? To dirty my shields. On the Retribution, Lee was screaming over the din. Energy, frequency sync achieved. The debris cloud is resonant. It's creating a standing wave interference pattern against their barrier frequency. It was a trick, a hack. They hadn't leaked the Arbiter's shield specs. They had observed them. Every energy shield had a resonant frequency, a harmonic weakness. The human plan wasn't to overpower it, but to annoy it, to disrupt it with a precisely timed, precisely placed cloud of junk. For 3 seconds, a tiny patch of the Golden Barrier, 100 meters wide, flickered and turned a sickly, unstable brown. All ships, needle formation. Go, go, go. Elena roared. The Retribution, engines screaming in protest, led the charge. It was like threading a needle with a freight train. Human ships, scraping shields, poured through the momentary gap. The Mjolnir lost its port engine nacelle in a shower of sparks. The Canterbury's belly was gouged open, its atmosphere venting in a silent scream. But it kept going, carried by momentum and will. They were through. They had bypassed the immovable object, not by moving it, but by ignoring its purpose, by finding the one crack in a perfect logic that said, "Thou shalt not pass." Behind them, the Arbiter sat, utterly unharmed but profoundly humiliated. Taylor's crystalline form trembled with a rage he had not felt in centuries. They had not fought him. They had insulted him. Pursuit. All batteries fire. Destroy them. But the human armada, though bloodied, was now a wolf pack inside the fold. They scattered, not toward the facility yet, but toward the dense asteroid field that surrounded Tychoni's prime. The Fifth Fleet, its discipline shattered by the spectacle and its logistics in ruins, moved to intercept in a disorganized wave. The battle dissolved into a brutal, close-quarters melee among the asteroids. Consensus ships, larger and more powerful, found their advantages neutralized. Human vessels used the rocks as cover, as weapons, as shields. The Kintsugi, nimble as a dragonfly, lured a consensus destroyer into a narrow canyon and collapsed both walls onto it with precisely placed charges. A human gunship, crippled and drifting, used its last power to broadcast a false distress signal, and when a Zith rescue shuttle drew near, its crew manually detonated their own reactor. It was not a war of attrition. It was a war of sacrifice. Every human ship and life spent not for victory, but for seconds. For meters of advance toward the moon where the facility was located. On the Retribution, bridge lights flickered. A direct hit had breached Deck 4. Elena gripped her command chair, her knuckles white. Status. The Mjolnir is gone. The Proud Mary is holding the rear, but she's not going to make it, Erickson reported, his voice thick. We've lost 17 signals. Elena closed her eyes for a millisecond, seeing the faces of the lost. Then, she opened them, harder than before. Leaf facility status. Shields are at full power. They've gone to lockdown. And Captain, the soul light readings. They're off the scale. The children, they're terrified. The facility is ramping up the harvest. It's like they're trying to drain them dry before we get there. A new, cold fire ignited in Elena. They were killing them. Not with guns, but with grief. Vraxis, she barked into the secure channel. You see it. They're murdering them. Give me something. A code, a vent shaft, anything. In the consensus command ship, Vraxis was a pariah. Tail had branded him a collaborator. But he was watching the same data. He saw the psychic energy spikes, the brutal efficiency of Xyler's harvest. He saw the humans dying not for conquest, but for chance. His centuries of service, his logic, his loyalty, it all crumbled before the raw, ugly truth on the screen. Captain Vance, he said, his voice a dry whisper over the channel. Maintenance conduit 7 Gamma. It runs from the outer shield generator to the primary reactor. It is shielded from sensors. Its emergency access hatch, its manual override code, is 7-7-3 Alpha Chi. Was treason. It was also redemption. Elena didn't thank him. She acted. Idixon. Plot a course to these coordinates. All remaining ships, cover us. We're going in for a hard dock. The Retribution, trailing debris, and Fury banked hard, ignoring the asteroids and the consensus fighters nipping at its heels. It aimed like a spear for a seemingly solid part of the facility's rocky moon, right at the base of a towering shield generator. On the facility's control platform, Xyler watched the approaching ship. He felt no fear, only a final, clinical triumph. Seal all sections. Divert all harvested energy to the internal defense grid. The specimen containment zone is now the epicenter of the shield. If they wish to retrieve the sources, they will have to destroy them in the process. A beautiful paradox. He had made the children both the treasure and the trap. To reach them, the humans would have to kill them. He settled in to watch the final, futile act of an irrational species. The Retribution filled the main viewport, its scarred hull blotting out the stars. It wasn't slowing down. The universe compressed to a tunnel of rock and screaming metal. The Retribution struck the moon's surface not with the grace of a docking procedure, but with the violence of a deliberate crash. Its reinforced prow, designed for ramming during the old resource wars, plowed into the regolith at a shallow angle, carving a furrow of fire and shattered stone a kilometer long before slamming to a stop directly against the facility's outer hull, right over maintenance conduit 7 Gamma. The impact was a world-ending sound inside the ship. Supports buckled, consoles exploded in showers of sparks, and the terrible shriek of tearing alloy drowned out the screams. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in a hellish red. Elena Vance pulled herself up from the deck, her arms screaming in protest, likely broken. Around her, crew members were stirring or lying still. Report, she coughed, the air thick with smoke and the bitter smell of electrical fires. Erickson was already at a cracked console, blood flowing from a gash on his forehead. Hull breach on decks 1 through 3. We're sealed off from the stern. Primary power is down. We're on batteries. But, Captain, we're here. The forward airlock it's mashed, but the outer hatch of conduit 7 Gamma is 10 meters to port through what's left of the cargo bay. Armory. Now, Elena ordered, her voice a rasp of command. She, Erickson, Lee, and a handful of other able-bodied crew, of a medic named Chavez and 2 hulking engineers, Ben and Mia, stumbled through the wreckage. The ship groaned around them like a dying beast. They reached a battered but intact locker, pulling on lightweight tactical suits and grabbing weapons, bulky magnetic rifles, cutters, and breaching charges. They clambered through a tear in the ship's hull, their boots crunching on moon rock and frozen fragments of their own vessel. There it was, a heavy, circular hatch marked with alien glyphs, set into the smooth, obsidian-like surface of the facility. The code, Elena said, covering the corridor with her rifle. Lee punched the sequence Vraxis had provided into a portable terminal wired to the hatch's interface. 7-7-3 Alpha, Chi. For an agonizing second, nothing happened. Then, with a reluctant hiss of long-sealed hydraulics, the hatch irised open, revealing a dark, cramped tunnel barely 2 meters wide, lined with pulsating energy conduits and coolant pipes. No life signs in the conduit, Lee whispered, scanning. But the energy flow is tremendous. It's all being routed inward. Toward the containment zone, Elena finished. Move. Quietly. The conduit was a claustrophobic hell. Heat radiated from the pipes, and the hum of vast machinery vibrated through their bones. They moved in single file, the only light from their helmet lamps cutting through the gloom. After what felt like an eternity, the conduit ended at another hatch. This one had a small, shielded viewport. Elena looked through. Her breath caught. Beyond was a cavernous chamber, lit in a soft, sickly amber glow. In the center, arranged in neat, cruel rows, were transparent capsules. Inside each one floated a child. Human children, ages ranging from perhaps 4 to 12. They wore simple gray smocks. Tubes and filaments were connected to their temples, their small chests. Their faces were pale, some contorted in silent screams, others disturbingly blank, their eyes open but seeing nothing. The soul light harvesters. A soft, mournful light, the stolen energy of their terror and hope, pulsed from them, traveling along thick cables into the ceiling. Around the perimeter, alien technicians, mostly Zith and Deline, moved with efficient indifference, monitoring consoles. Rage, white-hot and pure, flooded Elena's veins. This was it, the source of the nightmare. "Breach on 3, she whispered, her voice trembling not with fear, but with fury. Non-lethal for the technicians, if possible. We are here for the children. Erickson, Chavez, you secure the control podium. Lee, Ben Mia, with me to the capsules. We cut them loose." She placed a breaching charge on the hatch's lock. 3, 2, 1. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. The hatch blew inward. Elena was the first through, her rifle raised. "Down! Get down on the floor now." Chaos erupted. Technicians shrieked, scrambling. Some obeyed, flattening themselves. A Zith guard raised a weapon. Erickson didn't hesitate. A 3-round burst from his rifle tore through the guard's carapace. The sound of the gunfire was shockingly loud, a brutal, final noise in the sterile chamber. "No one else needs to die," Elena yelled, sweeping the room. "Shut down the harvest. Now!" The lean technician, trembling, moved to a console and began frantically inputting commands. The pulsing amber light from the capsules began to flicker and die. The filaments attached to the children retracted with a sinister hiss. "Lee, the capsules." Lee was already at the nearest capsule, her tools out. The transparent lid slid open with a sigh of escaping gas. The small girl inside, a child with dark hair, didn't move. Chavez was there instantly, scanner out. "She's alive. Catatonic. Severe psychic trauma. But alive." One by one, they opened the capsules. Some children whimpered, curling into fetal balls. Others stared, vacant. A small boy saw Elena's human face behind her visor and began to sob uncontrollably, reaching out with tiny hands. Chavez and the others worked swiftly, administering mild sedatives and stimulant from their medkits, wrapping the children in thermal blankets. Elena moved to the central console, her eyes scanning the data. She found the main manifest. 63 children, all present, all intact if broken. She also found the security logs, and the internal defense grid schematic Xyler had activated. Her blood ran cold. He's channeled the facility's primary power, the shield generator's residual energy, everything, into a containment field around this chamber, she said, her voice hollow. The only way to disable it from the outside is to shut down the main reactor, which is on the other side of the facility. And from the inside, Erickson asked, though he dreaded the answer. They pointed to a heavy, shielded conduit on the far wall. "That's the regulator for the internal field. It's a physical fuse. Blow it, and the field drops. But it's a feedback system. The energy surge will flood back through this conduit." "Meaning?" Ben asked, hefting a crying toddler onto his shoulder. Meaning, Lee said softly, whoever blows it will be at the epicenter of a psionic energy backblast equivalent to the combined fear of 63 children concentrated into a single point. It will vaporize everything in this immediate area. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. The only sounds were the soft cries of the children and the hum of the deadly field surrounding them. They had found the children. But Zyler's beautiful paradox was in full effect. To free them, someone had to die. Elena looked at the small, rescued faces at her crew. She had led them here. Through hell. Her job wasn't finished. Get them ready to move, she said, her voice suddenly calm. She walked over to the conduit, studying it. As soon as the field drops, you run. Back through the conduit, to the ship. The Retribution might have one short-range burst left in her. Get to the Armada. Captain, Erickson began, stepping forward. That's an order, Commander, Elena said, not looking at him. She began setting the breaching charges on the regulator conduit. Her movements were methodical, final. My daughter was on the Odyssey's dawn. Her name was Anya. She was 8. She had her laugh, Lee. She finally turned, her eyes glistening behind her visor, but her face a mask of serene determination. Get these children home. Tell them the monsters are gone. Before anyone could protest further, a new voice, smooth and cold, echoed through the chamber speakers. A truly moving performance, but ultimately a futile one. On a viewing platform high above, behind reinforced transparisteel, stood Zyler. He looked down upon them like specimens under a lens. You have terminated the harvest, yes. A temporary setback. But you are trapped. My forces are retaking the perimeter. Your ship is dead. And you, he said, his gaze locking on Elena, have just volunteered for the most fascinating experiment of all. What is the psychic yield of a human parent sacrifice, I wonder? It must be incandescent. Elena looked up at him, then at the charges in her hands. She smiled a small, tired, victorious smile. You still don't get it, Zyler. You think in terms of yield, of data. She primed the charges. The countdown flickered to life. 10 seconds. Erickson, go. Now. Her crew, hearts breaking, grabbed the children and fled toward the conduit hatch, tears streaming down their faces. Zyler's eyes widened slightly. You would? That is not logical. You will achieve nothing. Elena Vance stood before the conduit, her back to her fleeing crew and the rescued children. She looked at the countdown. 5, 4. She thought of Anya's laugh. 3, 2. She thought of Earth, of home. This, she whispered, is for the buzz. The world dissolved into a silent, blinding white. The explosion was not one of fire and shrapnel, but of light and silence. A wave of pure, unleashed emotion. 63 threads of terror, longing, and suddenly a shocking, defiant surge of hope collided with the focused will of a mother's sacrifice. The energy backblast did not vaporize, it transformed. Within the chamber, the amber light was replaced by a brilliant, clean white. The oppressive containment field shattered like glass, its energy dissipating harmlessly. The consoles around the room sparked and died, not from damage, but from a kind of resonant overload, as if shamed into silence. On the viewing platform, Zyler was thrown back not by force, but by the psychic shockwave. It was data, but data he had no filters for. For a fraction of a second, his mind, a fortress of logic, was flooded with the raw, unmediated experience of a child's nightmare, the warmth of a remembered lullaby, and the fierce, all-consuming fire of parental love. It was an equation with no solution, a song in a key he could not hear. He screamed, a sound of pure cognitive dissonance, and crumpled to the floor, his mind temporarily shattered, his precious logic in tatters. In the conduit, Erickson, Lee, and the others fleeing with the children felt only a warm, pushing wind at their backs like a gentle hand urging them forward. They stumbled into the wreck of the Retribution. The field is down. Go, 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 Erickson yelled, his voice raw with grief and urgency. He reached the shattered bridge, throwing himself into the captain's chair. The console was dead. Lee, I need power. Lee was already rerouting everything, bypassing burnt systems, diverting all battery reserves, life support, everything to the emergency thrusters and the short-range comms. We have one shot. With a groan that shook the dying ship, this response is AI-generated and, for reference purposes only.